Hello and welcome to this episode of the Print on Demand Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Kerry Egler, here with my co-host, Adrian Von Arx. And in today's episode, we are jumping into the US TikTok ban, what this means for you, the impact it's going to have on e-commerce sellers, and what you can do to prepare. So we want to break down everything you should know about this potential TikTok ban and how you can combat it in your own business. But before we dive into that, I want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast. If you're enjoying these episodes and getting value, it would really help us out for you just to hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or even if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to the podcast. That'll make sure you get notified when new episodes release, and it'll also help us grow this show. So we appreciate you so much, and thank you for listening. Let's jump in. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Print on Demand Playbook Podcast. Here with Adrian. Adrian, what's going on, man?
What's going on, guys? I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm taking off to San Diego with my wife tomorrow, which I'm really pumped about. We love it there. Spend a lot of time there. Aside from that, excited to be here. And this is a really hot topic right now. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I was actually in Las Vegas last week for a video, like a YouTube conference. And this news broke while I was there. I think actually in the middle of the conference, which is funny because it's a video conference. So you have a lot of TikTokers in the room. It is, I shouldn't call it a YouTube conference because it's really like a video conference. So there's a lot of TikTokers, a lot of YouTubers, just content creators really is who's in the room. Right. So it's really interesting because they were kind of trying to, speakers were on stage and kind of they talked about it a little bit or would mention it, and I think a lot of people were keeping tabs on what was happening with this. So it's going to be interesting to talk about it. And I want to hear your perspective on some of these things. It's going to be an interesting episode. But before we get into the episode, I do want to recognize one of our listeners, a review that was left from one of our listeners, from listener Bell4423. Thank you for this review, 5-star review. Says, I stumbled across Adrian and Kerry's Print on Demand Playbook podcast almost a year ago after trying to research ways to help my wife grow her own t-shirt business. After a few episodes, I was hooked. I've been a faithful listener since the first day, have even decided to start my own print on demand business. I've been so impressed with their knowledge and passion for the business that I even signed up for T-Shirt Legends Academy. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, to have Adrian as my mentor. All I can say is, wow, you guys are doing a fantastic job. I love that you keep putting out fresh new content for your listeners each and every week. Thanks for sharing. I look forward to the next episode. Let's go. That was really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Extra big shout out to you. So happy that you're in our community. We just can't say enough good things, man. I'm running out of things to say because people are always saying such nice things. And it's just an overwhelming level of gratitude. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for putting your trust in us. We know your time is valuable. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And really our goal is to help you learn, grow, take action, and see results. So I love hearing action oriented, when it's something people talk about them taking action. It's always really cool.
Yeah, and I also want to just give a huge shout out to all of our listeners because we've been getting a bunch of reviews lately. A lot of reviews being left, so we really, really appreciate that. It helps us grow. It helps the podcast just look better to new listeners. We really appreciate that. So let's move into a little bit of a breakdown of what this episode is what we're gonna talk about in this episode. And I do want to let everybody know too, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, so my voice is not quite all the way there. I'm probably 85%, but I'm trying to duke it out for this episode. We actually pushed back this recording one day, 24 hours, just to give me an extra day to kind of get some of my voice back. So I appreciate you bearing with me as I'm just fighting off a little bit of a cold. But the breakdown for today, what we're going to talk about. So first, we're going to talk about what's actually happening with TikTok in the United States. A lot of rumors floating around, a lot of misinformation. Maybe you don't really know what's going on. So we want to kind of tell you the nuts and bolts of what's actually happening with TikTok and kind of what you can expect. Because even as I dove into this issue in preparation for this episode, I was like, oh, really? I kind of didn't didn't know some of this stuff. So it's interesting to kind of know what's really happening. We also want to talk about the impact that this is going to have on e-commerce sellers as a whole. TikTok's become a huge e-commerce platform for marketing, for promoting your products. And so I want to talk about a little bit about the impact that it could have. And lastly, at the last portion of this episode, we want to tell you what you can do to prepare for a potential ban on TikTok, and what you should be thinking about, steps you can take, maybe where else to go as a alternative to TikTok to promote your apparel, print on demand, e-commerce business. So that's the breakdown of today's episode. Adrian, anything you want to say before we dive into point number one, kind of section number one of this podcast?
No, man.
Let's rock and roll.
Let's jump in.
Let's go. So let's talk about, what is actually happening with TikTok right now in the United States. So you've probably heard about the TikTok ban. And the first thing that I want to answer, first question I want to answer is TikTok banned right now? Like, if you have it on your phone, are you in any kind of danger? And the answer is no. TikTok's not currently banned or affected in any way as of today. So you can still use the TikTok app. You can still promote your products. As of right now, it didn't just instantly get banned. So you're good to go. Nothing to worry about really for the next few months. And we want to get into that more. But the next thing is, what's actually happened, because I think you are aware, TikTok is a TikTok ban has officially been signed into law by our U.S. president. And so essentially what the ban is, what this measure includes that the president has signed, is that the president has given ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok, he's given ByteDance 9 months to sell TikTok to a US-based company or person with a possible additional 3 months if a sale is in progress. So essentially what this ban is TikTok is unaffected for 9 months. So, basically from right now or from last week, we have 9 months. And during that 9 months, the owner of TikTok can find a potential buyer for TikTok. And if there is a sale in progress at the end of that 9 months, a potential additional 3 months can be granted to kind of complete the sale. So right now, somewhere between 9 and 12 months is kind of the time frame we have to either have, TikTok will actually be banned and it will be off of the App Store, and you won't be able to use it anymore, or it could potentially be sold to a US company, which could change TikTok, of course. Like, there could be a lot of changes that happen. Mm-hmm. There's a few more points here, but that's kind of the initial point that I want to bring up is, 9 month window, could be sold. Adrian, what are your initial thoughts on all this? Because this is officially signed. This isn't like going through the Senate or anything anymore. Like, this has gone through all of the different places in the government that it needs to go through. It's been signed off on by the president. So this is the official measure. What are your initial thoughts?
So the first thing I want to say is I just want to preface all of what I'm going to say by saying that I really want to put politics aside when we're talking about this, because I know that it's a really hot, political, controversial topic. And I care way more about how this affects brands, businesses, and creators. Politics aside, like at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Is it going to affect you, and how, right? So a couple things that I want to mention, and like, I'm just sharing the knowledge that I've learned about it. I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert. But from what I know, there has been an attempt to ban TikTok for the last 4 years, and nothing's been successful up to this point. What I also know is that this is the closest they've come. Like, this is the furthest they've gone with the ban. However, from what I understand, this can still be challenged in court, which means a couple things. One, it might push it out to way more than 9 months, or it might never pass the courts and it might never happen. It might be a failed attempt. So that's kind of like what I understand about it. I do think that we should be we should take steps to prepare for this happening, whether it happens or not. There's things that we can do to really protect our business for the long term, especially if TikTok is your primary acquisition channel. So,
Yeah.
you know, as someone with over 28,000 TikTok followers, this is how a lot of my audience, my community found out about me. I post on TikTok a lot. It's been very helpful for my business. But what I do want to say too is the goal, and maybe I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but the goal
Definitely.
So am I jumping the gun here?
Well, we'll talk about it in the third section, kind of what you should do. But
Okay.
I think, yeah. Go ahead. Keep going.
We'll wait to talk about the strategy. So yeah, I think I've said what I wanted to say for up to this point. Whether it happens or not, we still don't know for sure. The last point I want to make is if it is bought, from what I understand, is that it will not be the same because they will refuse to sell the algorithm, or they won't be able to transfer the algorithm. Like that's the concern, is that
That's what makes TikTok is the
right,
algorithm.
the algorithm,
Yeah.
the value is in the algorithm. And so from what I'm understanding, it's going to be very challenging if an American company were to buy TikTok for them to get the actual algorithm. And then, I mean, it's really only as good as its algorithm. So does that mean TikTok is just going to fizzle out and no one's going to use it? Or what does it mean? Will it get better? Who knows? But this is another challenge. If an American company did buy it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be this super smooth transfer. They just, here you go, they hand it over, and then it just, nothing changes, right? That's all I'll say for now.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see, what happens. You brought up a lot of good points. Number one, we are not going to get political on this podcast at all with our own thoughts. I do think what's interesting on the political aspect of it is that this was supported by both sides in the government. Now, that doesn't mean this is a reflection of what the people want. This is a reflection of the Senate and the House and the president and all that stuff. So there was support from both sides, which is really interesting. I do think that's an interesting point. But yeah, this is the furthest it's gotten. I would say this is an official thing. I mean, it's official, right? Like it happened. It's done. It's kind of a done deal. There's nothing really to be done except now we have to see what actually happens, if it sells or what happens. And you mentioned some things that are absolutely true. So there's speculation that due to court challenges, it could be held up in court for months or years, which would prolong the ban of this. So, ByteDance can challenge us in court, and then that could, like, court cases last forever. Like, they just go on and on and on. So this could get dragged out for the next 1, 2 to 5 years or longer. You never know. Which means that during that time, you would still be able to use TikTok, most likely.
Right.
And also on the same front, if a U.S. company were to purchase TikTok, what I've read from the experts say that that company or person would face crazy legal hurdles to try to actually complete a sale, complete a purchase of TikTok, and so that could also prolong this whole thing. But I do want to bring up, kind of on the other side, like, there's the possibility that, which I think is very unlikely, to be honest, that ByteDance doesn't challenge it in court and all that kind of stuff. But there is a possibility that maybe a sale doesn't go through and maybe it's just banned. Maybe the ban just happens. So I only bring that up to say you do need to be prepared. Like if you're using this platform, you do need to be prepared, because there is potential risk that, number one, it's banned and you just can't use it. Or number two, there are large scale changes that greatly affect the way that you do business, right? If there was a purchase to go through and those kind of things. So multiple scenarios. I think the most likely scenario, as you mentioned, is that, nothing happens probably in the next somewhere between 1 to 5 years, but that's even what I'm saying right there is very uncertain, right? Like, we don't know how long. Like, if it is held up in court, is that for an additional 6 months? Is that for an additional 3 years? We really don't know. So all of this combined, it just presents a lot of uncertainty. And
Right.
I think as a seller, as a business owner, you want to reduce risk, and so you want to consider these factors and have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything else we want to add to kind of point number one here before we move on?
No, I think I don't want to jump the gun. So I think that's great. Let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into, like in the last section, we're going to get into what you should do to prepare, some different ideas for you, some different options for you, and just how to kind of frame it and how to think about it. And I think that's where Adrian's going. So stay tuned for that. But the second thing I want to talk about on this episode is the impact to e-commerce sellers. And I've just got some like pretty basic stats here to go through this that I pulled from some different sources from 2023 data, just to kind of gauge, what is the impact, the real impact to e-commerce sellers, because we can sit here and say it's a super popular platform and everybody uses it, but like, what does the real data say? And so the most of the data I have here is from TikTok shops. So specifically selling on TikTok, selling your products on TikTok in a TikTok shop. What this doesn't take into account is like people just promoting their brands and promoting their companies on TikTok. That's kind of that's a different metric that is harder to really measure, right? Because a lot of people aren't using TikTok shops. They're maybe just creating content and promoting their products, to go to their website and all those kind of things. So, but just talking about TikTok shops, and I think this will help put it in perspective a little bit. TikTok shops generated $11.09 billion in sales in 2023. It's a pretty big number,
Mm-hmm.
11 billion. And I believe that's just US sales. Don't quote me on that, but the article I kind of pulled some of this from was mostly talking about US revenue. The second thing to know in relation to most of our listeners is that apparel, I didn't actually know this, but apparel was the second largest category in 2023 with around 2.5 billion in sales. So
Wow.
of that 11 billion, about 2.5 billion was apparel. And that came in just behind beauty and personal care, which was also
Okay.
about 2.5 million or 2.5 billion. So apparel, second largest category. And that was, just so you know, that was combined with, it was women's wear, men's wear, and then it was also, oddly, I don't know why they categorize it like this, but it was women's wear, men's wear, and then it was women's underwear and men's underwear. It's like, I don't know why, but it was like those four things. So I was like,
Random.
well, it's all apparel, so I'm gonna.
Right.
So I could have just said apparel, but whatever. Um, any thoughts so far on that, Adrian? What do you think? Are those
um,
big numbers? It's hard to tell, right? Are those big
right.
numbers?
It's also like TikTok Shop is actually pretty new too.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
very
like
new.
it was rolled out in the US not too long ago. Facebook, Instagram Shops had a huge head start on TikTok Shop in terms of being available in the US. And so you have to factor in that this is like within kind of like the last year, probably
Yeah,
time frame that it's hit all these numbers. There's absolutely no doubt that TikTok has changed the game for a lot of brands. Do I think it's the best social media platform to be on for t-shirt and apparel businesses? No. And maybe you're surprised to hear that. I think Instagram is better for a number of reasons.
well, I've got some stats that are going to back that up. That I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
I think will kind of drive that point home, because I did. Here's what I want to. By putting these data points in here for this episode, I I was really curious. I was like, well, because I just, you don't, when you hear numbers like this, you're like 11 billion. You're like, well, what is that? Sounds like a lot, but there's also like 350 million people in America. Like, is that a lot? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you
Right.
think about the bigger market picture, and you're like, well, is that a lot? So I put a few comparisons to Instagram in here because I was curious. That was the best comparison we can make is on Instagram. How big
Yeah.
is TikTok? What kind of impact is this going to have on e-commerce sellers versus something like Instagram, which I think we both believe is the best social media platform to build your apparel brand on. So here's some
100%.
different numbers. So there are 31,000, this is as of like the end of 2023, 31,000 TikTok shops in the US for, US based TikTok shops. There's about 200,000 globally.
Okay.
Okay. I searched long and hard. This actually was very painful trying to find the number of Instagram shops. And I could not find a US number, but I'm going to give you the number for global Instagram shops. There's over 25 million.
Versus how many
So
for TikTok? You said
200,000 globally.
dang.
So there's about 200,000 TikTok shops globally, 31,000 in the US, and there's about 25 million Instagram shops globally. Now, as you mentioned, TikTok shops just started, really last year.
Yeah.
Instagram shops have been around for a few years,
Yeah.
right? So hard to compare. Let me give you one more comparison.
Sure.
So this is not an apples for apples. So we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But the stat that I have here is 55 million TikTok users in the US have shopped on the platform. So 55 million users in the US have made a purchase on TikTok. The stat that I have for Instagram is not apples to apples, but it's something like about 180 million people in the US each month tap on an Instagram item, like a shoppable item.
Yeah.
It's about 180 million people. Now, that's not making a purchase, so it's not apples to apples.
Right.
But 180 million people are tapping on products on Instagram shops, clickable, taggable products per month. And that number, which is pretty crazy, that number is up from, I believe it was in 2020, it was at about 80 million. So from 2020 to 2023, we're in 2024, but this is 2023 data, from about 80 million per month to about 180, 190 million per month people tapping on. So it's like Instagram shops are growing like crazy.
Yeah.
While TikTok shops has also been growing because it's new. So I know it's not an apples to apples, but kind of just to put it in comparison, it's not. My personal opinion is TikTok is not yet really I would say for e-commerce a huge threat to a Facebook and Instagram from an e-commerce perspective. Yes, there are brands using it. Yes, there are brands making tons of sales. It's a great opportunity. I don't want to downplay that.
Right.
But I do want to put in perspective how huge Instagram and Facebook are in comparison. It's really hard to even make that comparison because they're so much bigger from an e-commerce and shopping perspective than TikTok.
Yeah, for sure. I've been bullish on Instagram shops for years, and I've been trying to get people to go on it because I've experienced a ridiculous amount of sales on it, and I know a lot of other people that are too. It was made for I feel like it was made for t-shirt and apparel brands. It was definitely made for e-commerce, and social commerce is becoming so popular. And what I love about social commerce, having shops built in, is that it's a super seamless experience where the user doesn't have to leave the platform. Usually they go on social media to be entertained, educated, or inspired. They're not planning on going in there to shop. But if you have an amazing brand and you're offering them value and you are entertaining, educating, or inspiring them, and you're also featuring amazing products that really resonate with them and their values and their passions, then you can have a ton of success. And it's nice, right? Because they can just shop all within the app. They can even check out and complete their purchase all within the app. And they got to stay in the platform. So it reduces friction in the buying process. And this is something you always want to do. You always want to make it as easy as possible for the customer to buy. So I am all for social commerce. I want to say that I really empathize with every brand creator that has kind of put all their eggs in the TikTok basket, or that it just is a big part of their business, a big part of their channel. I love any tool that empowers brand owners to unlock more freedom and flexibility in their life. And I love channels that work for people, whatever the best strategy is, what's working, right? And there are a lot of brands that this is their primary acquisition channel. So one thing that I always try to really hit home with is choose one single primary acquisition channel to master, to dominate, and leverage that channel, become an expert at that channel with the intention of taking that audience over to an owned platform.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're at that point yet, Kerry. Are we at that point yet?
We're ready to go there. I really just, in the second section, like I just wanted to paint that picture of, how big is TikTok to e-commerce, and in comparison, how does it stack up?
Yeah.
And I know it's bigger in other countries and different things, and that, so that's it, it's really hard to make the comparison.
Yeah.
But I think you're going where we want to go, and that's really point number 3 of this podcast episode is like, what should you do to what should you do to prepare for a potential TikTok ban? What should you be thinking about now? If TikTok is your primary acquisition platform, if it's the primary place that you are putting out content and selling, if it's a platform you were considering selling on, or you've started to look to TikTok as a potential option for your business, what should you do now?
Right.
And the first thing, that you mentioned is you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. Now, that can sound a little bit, that can sound like I'm going against what you're saying a little bit, but because you said pick one platform, become a master of it, one primary acquisition platform, and I 100% agree with you. But the big thing you also mentioned, and this is where I really want to spend time, and I know we've harped on this before, it's a core principle of everything I teach in my programs, is like, you have to take rented traffic on a TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, get them on your email list where it becomes owned traffic. And you want to own your traffic instead of just always renting it, right? And we have to use these rented platforms to get traffic. Like, we pay for advertising, and that's how we get people into our world. But then when we get them on our email list, that's something that can't be taken away from us. It's something that we own. You can literally press the download button and you can download a CSV file and you can put it on Drive if you want. And it's like, you're never going to lose it. You have those email addresses. And so that's why it's so important to build up an email list, potentially build up a, text message list with phone numbers, because that's something that you can always take with you, and it cannot be taken away from you. Even if a email marketing platform like Klaviyo were to ban your account or something, you still have your emails that you can then take to another platform. So it is an owned asset. And it's, I've said this before, I just want to mention it again. If you ever go to sell your business, one of the biggest things that the seller is going to ask for is, is your email list and like your customer list, right? Like, that's where the real value is going to be, to like a potential buyer, because you can always go back to that list. You can always generate more revenue, more sales, and continually sell to that list. Even if platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Google, anything, if these platforms ban you or shut down, you still have that email list to go back to.
Right.
So, Adrian.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts on this. Where do I start? Okay. First off, I just want to say that it's important to remember that the social media landscape is very fluid. It changes
Always,
a lot. Certain platforms evolve, certain platforms decline, some fizzle out altogether. Like, this is just the nature of the beast. They're always competing against each other. And so what you need to know is that the landscape is always changing, whether you notice it or not. And it's good to be aware of that, right? You want to be on a platform that is seeing growth, is that seeing a lot of engagement and whatnot. Going on to what Kerry said, like, acquisition channels are great for acquiring followers and getting sales and
building your brand,
introducing people to our brand, creating raving fans and brand loyalists, building a valuable audience who know, likes, and trusts you. It's great for all of those things. But the strategy for TikTok, like in this example, is the same strategy as we've always taught. Leverage acquisition channels, the rented platform. Remember, this is someone else's platform. They can boot you off. They can change your algorithm. They can get banned. These are always risks on a rented platform, right? But the goal should be to commit to mastery of one primary acquisition channel. I personally think overall that Instagram is the best for t-shirt and apparel brands in 2024. Maybe that'll change in the future. Who knows? However, I'm not trying to downplay all of the brands and creators that have had a lot of sales from TikTok, because I have a lot of students who they've posted videos that have gone viral of their wearing their products, and it's just like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That said, most people don't buy the first time they visit a website. And so this is why the owned platforms, email marketing is my personal favorite. It's what I think everyone should master. Master one acquisition channel. I usually recommend Instagram almost always, and master one retention channel. And I recommend starting with email marketing, because the fortune is in the follow-up. And so in order to future-proof your brand, for TikTok, it's the same strategy. It's the same strategy that it's always been. It's to leverage the acquisition channel to collect email addresses, to market to those subscribers, and then to convert them into followers. And like Kerry said, the value is in the list. I mean, obviously, if you have 100,000 subscribers and no one ever buys, then that's a crap list. It's just like a low quality list. You don't want that, right? But generally, your most loyal fans, your most loyal followers, and the ones that buy again and again and again, they're going to be on your email list, and you can send out an email. And if you have a winning design, it's like printing money to a valuable email address or a valuable email list, right? There's a lot of value in that. So the strategy remains the same. Leverage the acquisition channel to drive traffic to your website or to your shops, collect email addresses, and then bring them over to your owned platform.
Exactly. And I want to talk a little bit about what you should do, because this is all great. We're telling you like, here's what, here's a strategy, but you might be saying like, well, I've had all my eggs in the TikTok basket. I haven't been building my email list. What do I do now that a potential ban is in place? Well, I want to let you know that the good news is like you have a 9-month heads up, 9 to 12-month heads up. Like that's
Minimum.
great.
It could be
right?
way longer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be way longer, but now is the time to prepare. Don't wait until there's 1 month left, or until something happens, or until, tomorrow ByteDance just says, we're fed up with the US. We're just pulling our app. I mean, you just never know. And so, that's number one, is you have a huge heads up. So now you can focus on really building your email list and figuring out, how do I get these followers from TikTok over to my email list? And it's really not that difficult, right? Like, give them an incentive to get on the email list, give them something of value, and people will opt in. And that's pretty easy strategy. But also, I think what people should be doing now is considering going heavier into a platform like Instagram if you haven't already. The great thing about Instagram and TikTok is that the content is pretty interchangeable, right? As far as short form video goes. And that's really been the biggest craze over the last really 2 years is short form video. If you're doing any kind of short form content, to making TikToks, making reels, those are pretty interchangeable, right? So start posting some of that original content over to Instagram, and maybe leaning a little bit more heavily into Instagram, spending a little bit more time there, posting a little bit more there than maybe you are TikTok, and start to kind of shift a little bit of your focus over to a platform like Instagram, to become your primary platform. So it's just making a pivot in your business. And I feel pretty confident, you're going to be able to have as much or greater success on a platform like Instagram if you start to put some of your focus and your time there and learning the strategies and the algorithms and different things of Instagram. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. And I know a lot of TikTok creators are super anti Instagram, but let's just kind of take any ego out of this and think about what's best for your business. If you believe that you can build an audience of raving fans and build a brand off the back of Instagram, and it's going to support you in that, and it's going to create income and freedom in your life, then I mean, it's okay to change your mindset. It's okay to be like, you know what? Like, I am legitimately worried about TikTok being banned. And if I want to keep being a creator, an entrepreneur, a brand owner, and my livelihood is on TikTok right now, if I know it's going the way of Buffalo, if I think it's going the way of the Buffalo, maybe you should change acquisition channels. I've always been like an Instagram first acquisition channel guy, because I think for the last couple of years it's been the best platform for t-shirt and apparel brands, and I'm very bullish on it right now. If that changes in the future, it changes, but right now I think it's the best platform. And like Kerry said, a lot of the strategies on TikTok, they can also work on Instagram. Yes, they're different platforms. Yes, they have different algorithms. You've got a content-based algorithm on TikTok. You've got a social-based algorithm on Instagram. So there are some differences. But if you create high value, short form content on TikTok, guess what? A lot of that's going to perform super well on Instagram as well. Most of my content that I create for TikTok, I also post to Instagram, and a lot of it does well. And sometimes it does better on Instagram than it does on TikTok.
Yeah.
So on my primary channel for coaching, I remember recently I posted a short form piece of content on TikTok, and I was like, oh, I really think this is going to do good. I really think my followers are going to love this. I think it offers so much value. And it kind of flopped on TikTok, and I was like, what the heck? And then I reposted it. I just, shared the exact same video to Instagram, and it exceeded my expectations. So yeah, like that's one kind of thing that's going to make it a little bit more simple. For example, if you were on a platform that was all still image posts, and then you were trying to move over to a video first platform, or one where the best way to grow was to have short form video content, that's going to be a lot more challenging, because then
Yeah.
you have to create all that short form video content. But like, you probably have a lot of it already. Why not set up an Instagram, start posting on there, start building up an audience, lead with value, offer lots of value, and you can build up your followers. You might be surprised how many of your ideal customers are hanging out on Instagram. So yeah, I like this strategy. I don't like being quick to pivot from acquisition channels. Like, I think Instagram's
Yeah.
the best, and I would highly advise most people from switching off of Instagram and going to another acquisition channel. But this is like extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is like a weird situation.
one thing I also want to bring up that's, I think, an interesting point is, hypothetically, let's just say like TikTok does get banned completely in 9 months from now.
Mhm.
Um, you can bet your butt that hundreds of millions of people, I don't know about hundreds of millions, but tens of millions of people at minimum are going to be flooding Instagram, new users
Yeah.
and new eyeballs,
Yeah.
because that appetite for that for the content they're getting on TikTok is like, they're going to need to meet that appetite somewhere, right?
Right.
And we all know that the biggest competitor to TikTok is Instagram, and with reels and short form video, like, it's a lot of similar content is available on Instagram. And so I guarantee that both tens of millions of users, potentially hundreds of millions of users, and tens of millions of businesses are going to be pivoting to Instagram right when TikTok gets banned, potentially. So, right now you have a 9 month heads up. You're awesome because you're listening to this podcast and kind of getting a head start, right? And so you need to start now. You need to get
Mhm.
ahead of the curve, because in 9 months, when those tens of millions of new businesses are jumping over to Instagram because TikTok's banned, you're
Mhm.
already going to have 9 months of traction, 9 months of working the algorithm, 9 months of building an audience, right?
Right.
Potentially more. But it's so important that you start to make those pivots right now, and prepare yourself. So I just wanted to bring that up because I
Yeah.
think it really is going to be like a mass exodus, because if TikTok's not there, like, businesses and consumers are going to go somewhere else, and that's 100% going to be Instagram.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely don't think people are going to stop using social media, because
No.
if TikTok got banned, they're just going to find another vice,
Hmm.
right? And I think, I think it's going to be Instagram. And there, like, maybe there'll be a flood of new social media platforms trying to replace TikTok, and trying to model it. A lot of times we see these platforms just like come and go. Like, do you remember Be Real a couple of years ago?
Yep.
It got
It got
huge
pretty
over
big.
COVID. Everyone was using it, and now it's crickets. You never hear anything about it. And like Lemonade, another one that seemed like it had potential, and then you never hear about it. But maybe, I mean, TikTok came out of what seemed like the blue and really blew up over COVID. So maybe there will be a replacement. But like, I still believe that in 2024, Instagram is hands down the best platform. And I think you're right, Kerry. I think a lot of people, as soon as they lose access to TikTok, maybe earlier when they see the writing on the wall,
Oh, I'm sure there's already, I bet money there's already Instagram is seeing like, oh crap, there's a lot of new users coming. Like our new user numbers are skyrocketing because people are genuinely asking the question right now. They're like, am I going to get arrested for having TikTok on my phone? People just don't know.
Sure.
And so a lot of people, when you see something like this in the news, like, oh my gosh, the president, the Senate, the House have banned TikTok, you just go and remove it from your phone. Like, I'm done. I don't want to be, you know what I mean? And so I guarantee there's a lot of people now making that move just because they don't want to be associated with it because they think it's, whatever, it's frowned upon or whatever, so
Right.
that would be my guess. I'm not saying it's like a mass exodus, but I guarantee that they're starting to see those numbers tick up as more people start to learn about this, that it's a real possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I would say is, like, if that's something you're thinking about or you're going to do, or you're set on that, commit to mastery. If
Yeah.
you're on TikTok right now and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that I don't like see my brand's future being based around TikTok, and I want to make a pivot and jump to somewhere like Instagram, commit to mastery and send an email to your hopefully you have email subscribers. That should be priority number one, is always leverage acquisition channels, the rented platforms, to collect email addresses. Like,
Yes.
I have collected thousands upon thousands of email addresses from TikTok because that was my intention from day one. My intention was always to lead with value. I created my coaching. It's just my name, Adrian Von Arx, on TikTok. And my coaching business, I built it off kind of the back of TikTok because I felt like that was a educational platform, that a good educational platform, short form, that a lot of people were liking to learn from and they were searching on. And the goal from the beginning was like, I'm going to lead with value, I'm going to offer value, and then I'm going to drive people to an opt-in page where they provide their email to me in exchange for something valuable, like a freebie, like a free print-on-demand guide, something like that, right? And I've collected thousands upon thousands, and that should be the strategy for t-shirt apparel businesses. It's the exact same strategy. That's always the goal. You want exposure, you want to build up a following, and then you want to get that following over to your email list. So the first thing, if there's anything you take away from this, build the damn list. Like, go out there, build an email list, start driving traffic, offer an incentive for people to subscribe, because they're significantly more likely to turn into a paying customer if they're subscribed to your email list, and you can continue marketing to them. If you're just hoping that when you post to social media, they're all going to see it, well, first of all, that's just not going to happen. And two, a lot of people that do see it, they're not going to buy it the first time they see it. And this is why it's so important that you are continuing to market to them from an owned platform. So, yeah, I mean, I think two big takeaways are, one, if you do want to switch platforms, if you're just like, all right, I don't want to worry about this anymore, it's causing me stress and anxiety, I just want to switch platforms, you can continue posting on TikTok, but start pivoting your efforts to mastery of this other platform. Let's say Instagram. And then the second big takeaway is, you need to be building your email list. This should have always been the strategy. And this is just a wake-up call, and it just hammers home why. Like, maybe it didn't make sense before. Why? Kerry and I have been talking about this for years, and maybe people didn't really see the value. I know every time we talk about email, It doesn't perform well because it's not sexy. But so many of the sales are made in email. And going back to what Kerry said about the value of your brand, if you are selling your brand and you have a valuable email subscriber list and you can show the history of email sales, that's going to significantly improve the value of your brand because you have this owned platform. If they bought your brand and all you did was market on TikTok or Instagram and you never collected emails, there's a risk there. They're buying your brand, which is on an owned platform. Maybe they buy it and the next day your account gets terminated. It's known to happen. And so you have to be prepared for this stuff. And this is how you future-proof your brand. It always has been how you future-proof your brand. And this is just more reason why it's so important. But those would be the two takeaways: is master whichever acquisition channel, commit to mastery of whichever acquisition channel you have. You can start building up your Instagram while just repurposing that content to TikTok. Build up your email list. And then the other thing I would say is if you're 100% committed to this, send an email to your followers, to your subscribers. If you don't have an email list, create a video, create a carousel talking about how, you're like, if TikTok does get banned, like that's the livelihood of the brand, and that to future-proof the brand, we are moving over to Instagram, or we've also created an Instagram account. So please go over there and follow and support us if you love the brand. And you could probably get a lot of followers to go. Usually followers, they're kind of hard to jump platforms. Like it's hard to get followers to jump platforms because most people have like their preferred platform. But this is, again, extraordinary circumstances. And if your TikTok followers are thinking the same thing, like, I think I'm just going to stop using TikTok, or I think I'm just going to go on Instagram more, then they will follow you over there, especially if you offer a lot of value and they love your brand.
Definitely. Well, Adrian, I think that about covers it, man. It's good conversation. I think this is helpful for people. And so we appreciate you listening to this episode, and we'll keep you posted. If something else happens, something else comes up, we'll keep you posted on the podcast. So I just want to thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Print on Demand Playbook podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on whichever platform you are listening from. We appreciate them all. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.